I didn't break down when he said it.
That's the first thing I need you to understand. I didn't break down. I simply pressed my palm flat against the kitchen door frame, the way you do when the ground feels like it might shift and you want something solid to hold on to. Mom, would you mind having dinner in your room tonight? My son, David, 46 years old, standing at the stove in a house where I had prepared Thanksgiving dinner for 31 consecutive years, stirring a pot of gravy with the wooden spoon I had given his wife the very Christmas she became part of our family. And he wasn't even looking at me when he said it. He was looking at the gravy, as though the gravy were the more pressing concern in that kitchen. Behind him, at the dining table I had bought in 1989, I could hear my daughter-in-law Elena's voice guiding guests to their places. Her parents were there, her sister Marisol, her brother-in-law, a man who had never once said more than "Hello, Mrs. Whitfield" to me in 4 years of marriage, their children, 11 people, 11 name cards. I had not seen mine when I walked past. David, I kept my voice calm. I brought the pecan pies. I know, Mom, I know, the pies are lovely. Everyone will enjoy them. It's just, Elena's family is here and there's a great deal happening. And you know how things can get when there are... He stopped himself, reconsidered. When there are a lot of questions going around, so let's just... I made you a plate. It's in the warming drawer. You can take it upstairs. Watch something. Unwind. A plate in the warming drawer. As though I were a stray animal that had wandered in from outside. I looked at my son. I looked at the wooden spoon in his hand. I looked past him through the doorway at the back of Elena's head, at the way her shoulders were very, very deliberately not turning around to acknowledge that I was standing there. I thought about everything I could have said. I carried you for 9 months. I paid this mortgage until 2004. I drove 4 hours through snow to be here. I baked 3 pies from scratch. I am your mother. I said none of it. I said, "All right, David, where's the plate?" He showed me. A plate in the warming drawer, wrapped in foil, turkey, a scoop of stuffing, some green beans, no cranberry sauce, no rolls, no gravy, a meager portion, assembled by a man who clearly had no idea what his own mother preferred to eat. I carried it upstairs to the guest room, my guest room, in the house I had once called home. I sat on the edge of the bed and set the plate on the vanity. I didn't lift the foil. I didn't eat. I just listened. I listened to them laugh. I listened to Elena's father tell some story that made everyone roar. I heard a glass clink, a toast. To family. I heard my son's voice say the word, and I heard every other voice at that table rise up to meet his, and not one of them paused, not even for a second, to wonder why one chair sat empty. So I sat on that bed and I began to count. Not years, not dollars, dinners. I counted every meal I had cooked in that house, every Sunday roast, every weeknight meatloaf, every birthday cake iced at midnight because David had forgotten to mention he'd invited 12 children, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas ham, every casserole I had driven 4 hours up the highway to deliver after I moved to the condo because I didn't want my son to go without. I stopped counting at 400. I stopped not because I had run out of meals. I stopped because my throat had begun to ache. And then, very quietly, I made a decision. Not a loud one, not the kind involving slammed doors, the kind involving paperwork. I drove home before dawn the next morning, before anyone else was awake. I left the plate in the warming drawer, foil still untouched. I left the pecan pies on the counter with a note that simply said, "Happy Thanksgiving," in my neatest handwriting. And then I left something else on the kitchen island. The spare key David had given me in 2018, back when Elena first became pregnant. "Mom, hold on to this for emergencies." I wouldn't be needing it anymore. I drove the 4 hours back to my condo in a silence so complete I didn't even turn on the radio. Somewhere around Harrisburg, the sun came up. I didn't break down then either. I was busy making a decision, and a woman who is making an important decision does not have time for tears. When I got home, I unlocked my own door, put the kettle on, sat at my own table. Then I opened the folder I kept in the locked drawer of the desk that had belonged to my late husband, Raymond. Raymond had been gone 11 years, but the folder he had built me was still current, because Raymond was the kind of man who updated documents the way other people changed oil. Inside, the title to my car, in my name only, the deed to the condo, in my name only, and then the accounts, a 529 education trust I had established for my granddaughter Lily the day she was born, funded quietly every single month. Current balance, $94,000. A smaller one for my grandson Joaquin, started the day he was born. Balance, $38,000. The Christmas fund, a savings account I used every year for gifts. Current balance, $6,200. I had added to it in October. The David Fund, an account I had quietly contributed $200 a month to since Raymond passed, earmarked for David in my will. Balance, $71,400, and underneath all of it, a single sheet of paper I had nearly forgotten about, a loan agreement, the one Raymond had insisted David and Elena sign in 2016 when we helped them purchase their home. $38,000, 4% interest, payable on demand. David had made 2 payments in 2017. Then he stopped. Raymond passed 6 months later. And I had not had the strength to pursue my son about money while I was still learning how to sleep alone in a bed that was suddenly too wide. 8 years of silence, 8 years of interest accumulating. I did the calculation on the back of an envelope. Just over $51,000. I looked at that number for a long while. Then I looked at the $71,000 in the David Fund, the $6,000 in Christmas money, the education accounts for grandchildren whose mother had just counted 11 dinner guests and deliberately left one person out. And I realized something I had been too gracious to realize for 46 years. My son had an entire financial structure built around him that he didn't even know existed. His father had built it. I had maintained it. Invisible support beneath his entire adult life, silent, steady. And last night he had asked me to eat upstairs. I picked up the phone. Her name was Margaret Ojo. She had been Raymond's estate attorney for 20 years. When I called, the receptionist told me Miss Ojo was booked for 3 weeks. I gave my name. She placed me on hold for 90 seconds. Then Margaret herself came on the line. "Grace, what's happened?" "I need to come in. Everything needs to change." "When?" "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Bring everything." I hung up and sat with my tea. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel bitter. I felt the way you feel when you finally set down a bag you've been carrying so long you'd forgotten it was in your hand. Tuesday morning, I dressed carefully. The charcoal wool skirt Raymond used to say made me look like I owned a bank. The cream silk blouse, small pearl earrings. When you are about to reorganize a life, you do not dress like someone who has been sent to her room. Margaret's office was on the 18th floor downtown. Her desk had exactly 3 things on it: a laptop, a legal pad, and a small framed photograph of her late husband. I admired that desk. It was a desk that had made real decisions. I laid out the folder one piece at a time: the will, the trust documents, the education accounts, the David Fund, the Christmas Fund, the loan agreement. Then I told her about Thanksgiving. Margaret did not interrupt. Margaret did not offer sympathetic sighs. She wrote 2 words on her legal pad and underlined them. I saw them across the desk: "Eat upstairs." When I finished, she looked up. "Grace, what do you want to do?" I took a breath. "I want to do everything I should have done the first time. Call in the loan, full balance with interest, certified mail, 30 days to pay." She wrote it down. "Dissolve the David Fund. Transfer the balance into the 2 education accounts, divided evenly between Lily and Joaquin." She wrote it down. "Close the Christmas fund. Move the money to a separate place. I'll tell you in a moment. Remove David as executor of my will. Remove him as beneficiary on my retirement accounts. Remove him as power of attorney, medical and financial. Remove him from everything except the trusteeship of the children's education accounts, which would remain structured so that neither he nor Elena could ever access the principal. Who replaces him as executor? You, if you'll accept." "I'll accept." "Thank you." She leaned forward. "The Christmas money. Where is it going?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a worn brochure I had been carrying for 3 years without ever quite following through on. The Haven, a dining hall and community program for widowed seniors. I had eaten there once, on a day when my condo felt too quiet. A woman named Frances had sat with me and talked about her late husband for an hour. I had promised myself I would return. I never did. "The Christmas account goes here," I said. "And I want to discuss one more thing. The condo." Margaret looked up sharply. "When I pass, I want the condo sold, the proceeds donated to the Haven, a dining room named after Raymond. Grace, that's a significant reallocation. Margaret, he told me to eat in my room." She held my gaze for a long moment, then she wrote it down. "We worked for 3 hours. When we were done, she walked me to the door and set aside her professional composure for just a moment. Grace, I'm proud of you." "Oh, Margaret, don't. If you make me cry now, I'll have to fix my makeup in your bathroom." She laughed. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in 11 days. The loan demand letter went out by certified mail on Wednesday. I took my phone off the charger, set it to silent, and placed it face down on the kitchen counter. I already knew what was coming. I didn't need to watch it unfold. Friday morning, I turned it over. 17 missed calls from David, 4 from Elena, unusual because Elena had never called me directly. 1 voicemail. I played it on speaker while I made toast. Mom, it's David. Listen, I don't know what's happening. We got this letter from someone named Oho. $51,000, Mom. Are you serious? You never mentioned any of this. Dad said that loan was, Mom, Elena is beside herself. Call me back. Call me back today. I buttered my toast. I ate it standing at the window, watching a cardinal land on the small feeder I'd hung the day after Raymond passed, because those left behind need something to tend to. Saturday, the calls began again. Then a voicemail from Elena. Hi, Grace, it's me. Listen, I don't know what David said or did at Thanksgiving, and I'm sure we can sort out whatever this misunderstanding is. But sending us a legal letter over a family disagreement? It's a really unfortunate approach. Please call him. He's beside himself. The kids are asking questions. Let's not do this. The kids are asking questions. 3 months earlier, my granddaughter Lily had asked me on a video call why I never came over for dinner anymore. I had said, "Oh, honey, Grandma's just been very busy." I hadn't told her the truth, which was that her mother had quietly stopped including me 4 months before that, after I had made the mistake of gently correcting Elena about which fork to hand Lily at a restaurant. But now the children were asking questions. Now it was pressing. I deleted the voicemail. Sunday, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. David, alone. No jacket, just the old hoodie he wore around the house, which meant he had driven 4 hours without even stopping to put on a coat. His hair was uncombed. He hadn't shaved. I did not open the door. "Mom, your car's in the lot. I know you're home." I stood on my side of the door. "Mom, whatever happened, whatever Elena said, and I know she can be, I know there are things, but this letter, Mom, please, just open the door." I thought about the plate in the warming drawer. I thought about Raymond, sitting at his desk in 2016 saying, "Grace, he has to sign it. I love him. But he has to sign it because otherwise we're teaching him that we don't matter." I did not open the door. David stood there for a long time, and then I heard a sound I hadn't heard from him since he was 12 years old, the year his father caught him in a genuine act of dishonesty and sent him to his room to reflect on it. The sound of a grown man realizing that this time nobody was coming downstairs to let him back in. He left. I made tea. On Monday, I called the Haven. The woman who answered was named Beatrice. When I mentioned I was considering making a meaningful donation, she said, "Oh, honey, don't be one of those callers who wants to be thanked before they've written a check. Come have lunch. It's pot roast Tuesday." I laughed out loud in my own kitchen. I hadn't been addressed like that by a stranger in years. I went to lunch. The Haven was a converted old schoolhouse in a neighborhood 2 miles from my condo that I had somehow never driven through in 30 years of living nearby. Beatrice met me at the door in a cardigan that had clearly survived at least one grandchild. The dining hall seated perhaps 60 people, widows, widowers, a few couples who came because the conversation was simply warmer than their own kitchens. Frances was there. She remembered me. She waved me over. I ate pot roast at a round table with 6 strangers who within 20 minutes were no longer strangers at all. A man named Horace, who had delivered mail for 40 years. A woman named Deline, a former church organist. Frances, whose husband had passed on a Tuesday in 2019 and who admitted she hadn't eaten a proper meal until she discovered this place. Nobody asked what I did for a living. Nobody asked about my children. They asked if I liked the pot roast and whether I played cards. I stayed for 3 hours. On the way out, Beatrice walked me to the door and said gently, "Grace, whatever you came here to work through, you've worked through it, haven't you?" I believe I have. "Come back Thursday. It's meatloaf." I will. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long while, not crying, just sitting, listening to the heater run, thinking about how close I had come to allowing my son and his wife to shape me into a woman who eats alone in a guest room while her family toasts each other downstairs. How close I had come to accepting that as the pattern of the rest of my life. I drove home. I called Margaret and told her to finalize the Haven donation. Elena came on Wednesday, alone, which surprised me, and without a dish of food, which didn't. She was wearing her good camel coat, the one she reserved for occasions she considered significant. She had put on lipstick for the drive. She rang the bell twice. I opened the door halfway, not all the way, halfway. "Grace, can we talk?" "We can talk right here." She glanced past me into the foyer, where she had clearly expected to be welcomed in. She rearranged her expression. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I think David handled Thanksgiving poorly, and I know he said things he shouldn't have. He's devastated, but this letter, Grace, $51,000, we simply cannot manage that. Lily's orthodontist alone." "Elena." She stopped. "I'm going to ask you one question. You don't have to answer out loud. I just want you to hear it." "All right. When David told me to eat in my room, did you know he was going to say it? Or did he surprise you?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Her silence was the answer. It had always been going to be the answer. I had simply needed to see her expression when I asked. "You made 11 place cards, Elena. 11. You had accounted for every person coming to that table, and I was not among them. You didn't set a place for me. And then when I arrived, you sent David to handle it. And he did, by asking his mother to eat upstairs. You didn't have to say the words yourself. You simply had to arrange the chairs. Her face did what it always did when cornered, flushed deeply red. That's a terrible thing to say. It's an accurate thing to say. Those aren't the same, though I understand why they feel that way to you. We came here to make things right. No, Elena. You came here because you received a legal letter and believed you could negotiate your way out of it, the way you've guided David away from every honest conversation he should have had with me for 10 years. I'm not bitter toward you. I want you to know that. I'm not even wounded anymore. I am simply finished. She stood on my porch in her camel coat. You're being unkind. I'm being honest. She turned, walked to her car, looked back once from the driver's side. I could see her lips moving. She was rehearsing what she would tell David on the drive home. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. I went into my kitchen, set the kettle on, and opened the cookbook I had stopped using years ago, because cooking, for one, had begun to feel like a form of sorrow. I turned to the page for Raymond's favorite stew, read the ingredients aloud to the empty kitchen. Then I drove to the grocery store and bought every single one of them. Lily called 3 weeks before Christmas. My granddaughter is 9 years old. She had taken her mother's phone from the kitchen counter and locked herself in the bathroom to make the call. Grandma? Hi, sweetheart. Are you upset with us? I sat down at my kitchen table. I breathed. No, baby. Grandma is not upset with you. Grandma will never be upset with you. But Grandma and your mom and dad are going through a grown-up disagreement, and sometimes grown-ups need a little time to sort things out. Do you understand? Kind of. Grandma? Yes? I got a solo in the Christmas concert. I'm singing "O Holy Night." In the middle verse, it's just me, all by myself. A pause. Mom said you probably wouldn't come. My heart folded into a very small, very tight shape. Mom said you probably wouldn't come. As though I were the kind of grandmother who missed her granddaughter's concert. As though I were the one who had shut the door. Sweetheart, what day is the concert? December 18th, 7 o'clock. I will be there. Front row if they'll allow it. Second row if they won't. She started crying. Quiet, careful crying, the kind a 9-year-old does when she doesn't want her mother to hear through the wall. Grandma? Yes, baby. Is my college money still there? So that was what she had overheard. Lily, listen to me very carefully. Your college money is in a safe place where no one can ever touch it except you when you're old enough. It has been there since the day you were born. It will be there when you're ready. That will never change. And Joaquin's too? Joaquin's too, I promise. She exhaled, the way only a child exhales, as though she had been holding her breath for weeks. I went to the concert. Elena saw me in the doorway and went pale. David half rose from his seat, then sat back down, because what was he going to do? Ask his mother to leave a public elementary school auditorium? I walked past their row without looking at them. I took a seat 3 rows back on the aisle. Alone. Lily spotted me from the risers. Her entire small face opened into a smile so radiant I had to look down at my program for a moment, because I was not going to cry in front of strangers. She sang her verse alone in the center of that song. A song, if you know it, about a soul finally recognizing its own value. She sang it like a little girl who had just been reminded for the first time in a long time that she was cherished. When it ended, Elena moved toward me in the aisle. I raised one gloved hand the way a woman directing traffic does. She stopped. I walked to the edge of the stage, knelt down and opened my arms. Lily leaped off the risers into them. I held her until the auditorium lights brightened around us. Over her shoulder, I looked at my son. David was crying, openly, in public, in a folding chair in an elementary school gymnasium. I held his daughter. I did not say a word to him. I didn't need to. My silence was a sentence he had composed himself. His letter arrived the week after Christmas, no return address, his handwriting. Mom, I've been trying to write this for weeks. I keep starting over. I know what I said at Thanksgiving. I know I let Elena set a table without a place for you. I know Dad would never have allowed that, and I know he would be deeply disappointed in me. Because I am disappointed in myself. I'm not writing to ask you to undo anything. I won't bring up the loan. I'm writing because I watched you hold my daughter after her solo, and I understood for the first time in a long time. My mother is a person, not a convenience. I don't know how to be better yet. I've started counseling. Elena has not, and I don't know what that means for us. I just wanted you to know, your son, David. I read it twice. I placed it in a drawer. Not the trash, not a frame on the mantel. A drawer, because some apologies need to rest in a drawer for a long time before they become something more. That's not coldness. That's honesty with patience behind it. On New Year's Eve, I went to the Haven. Beatrice had organized a small dinner for anyone without family plans, which was most of us, and nobody pretended otherwise. Francis was there. Horace was there in a wool sweater his wife had knitted him in 1998 that he wore every single year. Deline played Auld Lang Syne on the old dining hall piano, and we all sang, and most of us teared up, and nobody apologized for it. At midnight, I stood with a plastic cup of sparkling cider in my hand, and I thought about that plate in the warming drawer. I thought about the woman I had nearly become, a woman who accepts a child's portion, carries pies 4 hours up a highway, and then quietly eats alone in a room where no one can see her. I thought about how close I had come to accepting that as the shape of the rest of my life, and I thought, he said, "Mom, eat in your room." And I answered, not with my voice, with my life. I came home that night and opened the small notebook I'd begun keeping on my nightstand. I wrote one line. They gave me a plate upstairs, so I set a table somewhere else. Then I turned out the light, and I slept the way a woman sleeps when she has finally stopped waiting to be offered a seat at a table she had paid for, cooked at, and long since outlived any reason to go on requesting.